Today's episode is proudly sponsored by the Rising Tide Mastermind. The term mastermind was originally written in Napoleon Hill's book, Think and Grow Rich. Before that, the earliest documentation that we have of a mastermind group was Ben Franklin's group that he used to meet every single week in a tavern that he called Huntus. Nation, there's no doubt about it. Life is too short to do it alone, and it's not very much fun to do it alone in. Nation, I urge you to go to scalinguph2o.com and find out if the Rising Tide Mastermind is right for you. I'd love to have a 15-minute call with you to explain all things Rising Tide Mastermind and see if this is a group that's right for you and you are right for the group. Go to scalinguph2o.com/mastermind. Welcome to the Scaling Up H2O podcast, the podcast where we scale up on knowledge so we don't scale up our systems. I'm Trace Blackmore, certified water technologist Trace Blackmore, and I want to welcome you to the show. Nation, it is hard to believe that we are more than halfway through the year. And for those of you in the United States, we have July 4th coming up. And July 4th, one of my favorite holidays. And there's just so much fun stuff to do on July 4th. Normally the weather's pretty nice, so we can do outdoors activities. Normally pool activities or lake activities are involved. Normally there's the grilling of some sort of meat, which I am all about. I think I've shared with the Scaling Up Nation, I am a certified barbecue judge with the Georgia Barbecue Association. So I actually get to go and people spend thousands of dollars and so much time to create these boxes of meat happiness that they bring to me and my fellow judges. And we not only get to eat it, we get to judge it. And it's just an incredible experience. So anytime we get to do anything with meat, I am always a fan of that. So I hope you are planning to have a great July 4th. I'm pretty sure they call July 4th something different over in the UK. They don't call it Independence Day. Maybe I can ask our next guest that. But some facts about July 4th that maybe you knew, maybe you didn't know, that every year on July 4th, descendants from the original signers of the Declaration of Independence ring the Liberty Bell 13 times to represent the original 13 colonies. Massachusetts was actually the very first state to declare July 4th a holiday. And of course, a tradition, if you are in the New York City area, in Coney Island, the hot dog eating contest. So that, of course, is put on by Nathan's Hot Dog. That is the only hot dog that is consumed in the Blackmore household. And I guarantee if we are grilling hot dogs on July 4th, it will be a Nathan's Hot Dog. Now, that can probably cause a lot of controversy because I know there's a lot of different ways that people enjoy hot dogs all over the listening area of this podcast. So hopefully I didn't start any negative items by hot dog wars that are going out there. Remember, we are all friendly water treaters, and we can all eat our hot dogs any way that we wish. Ooh, ketchup or no ketchup? That is a very violent debate. So again, Scaling Up Nation, calm down. You can enjoy your hot dog any way you wish. And I hope wherever you are, you have a pleasant July 4th. And if you're somewhere where you don't celebrate July 4th, well, July 4th is still a great date. Go ahead and celebrate that great day. Something else I hope you celebrate with me is to put on your calendar July 11th, and that's when we're having the next hang. And the hang is where we get together for a video call of water treaters. That's right. You get to join your very own community within the Scaling Up Nation. We call it The Hang. We start promptly at 6 p.m. Eastern Time, and that will go for exactly 1 hour. You're going to learn about what's going on in the industry, and then you are quickly going to network with other people. You're going to meet people you had not met before, and these are people that can most likely help you with future challenges that you have. And then we will quickly move into some sort of fun game. And I will say goodnight. And that would be probably the most productive hour that you've spent on your career in a very, very long time. So to find out more about that, go to scalinguph2o.com/hang. And all that information will be right there for you. Nation, I always like to tell you about what's going on in the industry. And I don't have a lot of time on the show to tell you everything that's going on in the industry. So if you go to scalinguph2o.com, go over to our events page, you will be amazed at how many water-related events are going on. And then you get to pick and choose the ones that you want to go to. You might find some that are in your backyard that you didn't even know about. Now, something you might want to put on your calendar is the Association of Clean Water Administrators. Their annual meeting is taking place August 21st through 23rd in New Orleans, Louisiana. Who would not want to go there? Get the beignets. They are amazing. Of course, we'll have information about this event on our events page. And then the Association of Water Technologies is having their annual conference September 10th through 13th in Louisville, Kentucky. So we're going to be talking a little bit more about that with our interview. And it's with that I want to go straight to our interview because I know you're going to learn something. My lab partner today is Lee Bainbrigge of SMS Environmental. Welcome, Lee.
Thank you, Trace. Good to be here.
Great to have you here. Whenever I have somebody from the UK and you have that accent, it elevates the smartness of this podcast. So thank you for doing that.
Trace, I think you might be overstating my presence on this podcast. The accent might be okay, but let's hold out on the content, shall we, for now?
Lee, you and I have had some fun over the short time that we've known each other, but I want to make sure that the Scaling Up Nation knows who they are listening to. Would you mind introducing yourself to the Scaling Up Nation?
Yeah, sure, Trace. I'm Lee Bainbrigge. I'm currently the Chief Sales and Marketing Officer for SMS Environmental, and I'm responsible across the UK for heading up the accounts, the sales, our bid management and our marketing output as an organisation. And then SMS Environmental, probably one of the most recognised water hygiene treatment providers in the UK. We're somewhere in the top 5% of organisations in our sector. And I'd sort of say we're really proud to be, I'd say probably the largest, I can't confirm that, but probably the largest still independent provider in our sector. So we're rightly proud of that.
Well, if you can't confirm it, neither can anybody else. So we're just going to go with it.
I think so. I think it's a pretty good guess, to be honest. Yeah.
So we had John Sanford on, and I don't have his podcast episode number in front of me. We'll have it on the show notes page. And he told us a little bit about what was going on in the UK when it comes to Legionella. And we're gonna get to that in a minute. But I wanted to talk about, you and I were recently at the Association of Water Technologies convention. I believe that was your first AWT convention. I was kind of curious, why did you go? What was your experience? What did you do there? If anybody has never been to the AWT, normally people go to it in the States. They don't have as far to travel as you did. You decided it was all worth it. Tell us why.
Yeah, I guess from our point of view, and as you know, Trace, I came across with John Sanford and Gavin Harris, the managing director of SMS Environmental. And we came over almost like with open eyes, bit of a fact-finding mission. We weren't looking for any sort of business opportunities or anything. It was really just, let's go over. Obviously, we were supporting John. John was speaking at the conference as well. And for us, we came back with big glowing feedback for everyone else here in the UK.
That's where you and I officially met in person. Before that, John connected us both on LinkedIn. So we were sharing some things back and forth. I'll never forget when we met in person, you congratulated me on winning a contest I didn't even know I was competing in.
Don't tell me you didn't know that, Trace.
Well,
Come
I knew
on.
I was okay. So let me key the Scaling Up Nation in. So anyway, I'm proud of being a water treater. I'm proud of if we've got speakers in the mastermind group that are presenting, if we've got a certain podcast that's coming out during the convention, I let everybody know that. So on the plane, I didn't have anything else to do, so I just started filling out all this stuff. And apparently, you get points for that. You showed me where the points page was. It was actually on the home page. I just didn't scroll down enough. I really didn't know, but yeah, I think I beat the pants off of you on that contest.
You sure did. You really did. In fairness, you had lots to talk about and I had very little. So I think I was pretty proud that I even made it onto the leaderboard. And yeah, sure. I mean, they gamified my journey over to the US. And then when I was over there, I guess one of the things I most enjoyed when we were at the AWT conference was that whilst everyone else was playing golf, I'm not a big golfer. And so I just sort of saw what else there was to do in the Grand Rapids and got some great guys involved in a group on this Wovia app to just meet up and go around the it's quite a prestigious art installation. It's like there were gardens and a sculpture. It's like a sculpture tour that we went on, and it was fantastic. Met some great guys from the water treatment sector over there in the US.
How awesome is it to meet people that do what you do? You can have a regular conversation about your day and you don't have to preface it with any extra information. Well, what's a cooling tower? What are you talking about?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And yeah, as I said, there was lots to learn. I mean, I guess, and again, we'll talk about this a little bit more in the podcast. We are real champions over here in the UK of the CWT qualification. And part of that is to almost recognize that over here in the UK, we may have sort of just lost that focus on real water treatment and understanding of chemical makeup and different ways that you can treat different problems. And that's just so evident over in the US. It's almost a complete flip, if you like. We're going over there talking about Legionella control. That's something that is just beginning to gain awareness over in the US, I guess. Obviously, more so in New York State and in a few isolated situations. But pure water treatment, yeah. And so much knowledge there in the US. It's great.
You mentioned Legionella. There is a vast difference in how you all look at it over in the UK, how we look at it over here in the States. As you mentioned, unless you're in a few select areas like New York. We went over to Scotland a couple of years ago and we went on a hike and there were reindeer involved and it was a group thing that my wife started or did the tickets for. Anyway, there was a gentleman that pulled up in an environmental placard car that had something about Legionella. And I just started talking about Legionella. And he started telling me all the things that you had to do over there. And we just don't think about it this way. And I wanted to learn more. And he finally told me, I'm on holiday. I really don't want to talk about my day-to-day job. Will you leave me alone?
Well, the first thing I'll say, Trace, if you did very well to spot a reindeer in Scotland, because as far as I know, they're not native.
but we were on a special trip, so I think they were there just for us in that pen.
Yeah, well, that's great. But yeah, absolutely. In the UK, I would say there's a massive difference. We've got a good amount of established guidance over here. That guidance is effectively coming from our health and safety executive. So it becomes statutory law almost. It's relatively prescriptive in terms of that guidance. But it's also relatively easy to do. It's just making sure that you record that. So Over here, obviously sort of the two primary ways that we're controlling Legionella are the same ways you do over in the US. It's all about keep that water moving and make sure that you're using temperature as your control as well. So those are your two primary control methods over here. And it's just that there is a emphasis on making sure that once you've established that control, you're recording, you're making sure that it's evidence that you've maintained that control within your buildings. But I would say there's a good level of understanding in most organisations across the UK that this is something that they all have to do, and that there's an onus on what we would call a duty holder over here. They're often the building managers. It'd be the duty holder, or the responsible person, would be the building manager. There's an onus on them to establish those control schemes.
So that episode that I was referring to earlier, that was episode 203. That's when John came over. Didn't come over. He came on the podcast and told us what was happening over there. And he had specific instances that he cited on that podcast. He used part of that talk to develop what he said over at the AWT convention. And I think for a lot of people, they didn't realize how strict things were outside of the United States. And I want to say that when Adam Green got up to speak after John finished his talk, he said, "Anybody want to sell their water treatment company?"
Yeah, bless Adam. He was, wow, what a speaker. Fantastic. Yeah, he had a good point. As I said, it was very noticeable when we went to the business owners meeting that the guys that were involved in water treatment in New York, you could see written on their faces. It was very similar to the faces that you see over in the UK about how prescriptive some of these things become, how the onus is on really making sure that if you've done it, you record it. And over here in the UK, I think it's becoming increasingly rare, if I'm being honest, that we are still reliant on paper documents because of the amount of information we're having to collate. As I said before, the types of control that is required of you are relatively straightforward, low-cost solutions in the most cases. Be sure to record it, because if anything goes wrong on your site, that will be the one source of truth, if you like. And if it isn't written down, if it isn't in a compliance system, then I'm pretty sure that as far as the inspection body are concerned, it hasn't happened.
I've heard listeners give out this podcast and particular episodes to potential lawmakers that are thinking about writing Legionella legislation and introducing that to make it become law. So if you had an audience with one of those individuals, they're listening over here in the States, knowing what you know, what would you tell them to do? What should they be crafting to make it more user-friendly, more effective?
Good question, Trace. Let's see if I can give you a good answer. I think when we came over to the States and John spoke with, Bob Cunningham was involved with that as well as and was shared the stage with Adam as well. I would say it was kind of be careful what you wish for. Effectively, the guidance you've got in the US is proportionate. If it's in the right hands, you're going to do a good job with the guidance that you've got here. In the UK, it can seem quite prescriptive. Yeah, I'd argue probably I'm all for the golden mean. Just go down the centre somewhere. Is that I think probably the most reasonable guidance you could come at somewhere in between the two, if I'm being honest. I think there are pros and cons on both sides. So in the UK, we've got to focus on the fact that we're trying to reduce risk, and we want to make sure that all of those efforts and the money and the time that goes into that are really changing the dial of risk and maintaining that control. And I think that's where good providers, hopefully like SMS Environmental, come into this, that they don't overprescribe, that they don't overstate risk, and so that our end users can be proportionate with their control and they're not overspending in needless areas, so that money can then go on areas where they potentially could focus more of their efforts.
If I recall, John's big point was there was just so much involved with Legionella in the UK, and all these people were responsible that you could get sued. And if something wasn't documented, I mean, he really painted a picture of this huge ball of twine, if you will, where Legionella was as far as the legislation was in the UK. And his advice was that he really thought how ASHRAE 188 was written, where it says this is what you need to do, but it didn't tell you how to do it. So that way you could put the specifics of each individual location in mind. He was urging us to go forth with that. And I think that's what you were saying in your previous comment.
As I said, I kind of agree with that, but I'd be somewhere earing towards the UK as well. Probably wouldn't be quite as open-ended as it is in the UK.
And I might have misinterpreted John's point as well.
No, I think he maybe but that's his own sort of personal point of view. But from my point of view, I'd sort of go, I think that there is the sort of seed of truth is somewhere in the middle. I think that would be optimal. And I'm sorry if that seems like I'm sitting on the fence, but that's genuinely where I sort of feel.
Well, I get it. Everybody has an opinion, and then there's also all the experiences that you have that I'm sure is why you're on the fence to that. So don't apologize.
Yeah, no, look, to some extent, as I said, I think the guidance in the US in the right hands is all that you'll need, because it's focused on everything that you need in terms of maintaining that control.
Lee, let me ask you this. We've just recently, over the last couple of years, came out with a certification, ASSE 12080. So for people that are doing water management plans, it's not a requirement, but this is the certification that people hold so they can do that. And now as customers, as equipment owners know about this, they're starting to demand that more and more. Would you say, knowing what you do about ASHRAE 188, knowing what you do about this certification, are we going in the right direction?
Yeah, absolutely. I think over in the UK, that would be what we would deem our Legionella risk assessment, if I understand it correct. The one thing I'd say about those management plans or Legionella risk assessments is that if you're going to third parties to get those produced for you, just make sure that the people that are carrying out that are competent and you're actually getting good advice at the beginning of your control scheme. If you've not got that good information, that good oversight at the beginning, then effectively your control scheme or what the measures you're going to put in place aren't going to be that good either. So that would be like, it was almost the point. One of the reasons I joined SMS Environmental, we didn't go too much into my background, Trace, but I used to effectively be a regional manager for a sanitary ware provider. So SMS was just one of my customers, effectively, but so were other water treatment providers in my region. And SMS just came across just so different in terms of they were prepared to make hard decisions or take hard decisions themselves to demonstrate their quality, their competency to their users and offer them more protection. So over here in the UK, we have an accreditation for our risk assessment provision called UCAS. It's our national accreditation body, and it basically demonstrates that the people who have gone and carried out, as you would say, the water management plan on site, or we'd call the Legionella risk assessment, are competent to carry that out. And we're still one of the few service providers, full service providers, that have got that accreditation. And for me, if I was an end user and knowing what I know about inspections on sites, I just literally would just go, I'm going with a UCAS provider. That will make me sleep well at night, knowing that effectively my due diligence in finding out if that organisation was competent to carry out that risk assessment is so. Now, I don't expect you've got that in the US, but when we went over to the AWT, was just speaking to some of the guys on the stands, I can't remember one of the organisations, but they were offering these services also to hospitals. And I was particularly interested in a conversation that they were having with one of their clients, a water treatment provider, where they'd actually criticised their water treatment provider to the water treatment provider's own client. And yet I spoke to that water treater and they went, kind of wouldn't have it any other way. He actually said, I'm not competent to do what these guys are doing, but I want my client to have this good advice coming in.
Well, I appreciate you, and I'm sure the entire Scaling Up Nation appreciates how you've kind of compared and contrasted what the US is doing versus what the UK is doing around Legionella. Let's specifically focus in on the UK. What are some challenges that you're focusing right now?
Well, I think it's, as ever, around competency, training, knowledge within our industry, for sure. Just with service providers there, making sure that we're providing a good service for our end users. And with that focus on protecting public health, basically, as you know, most of our work is with regards to Legionella control. But then beyond that, we have got challenges with, and I'm sure this is the same in the US, we're now getting new novel systems coming into our domestic hot and cold water systems. So the use of heat pumps and different ways of sourcing energy and reducing water flow, those are all having an impact on Legionella control. The fact that less water is being used in the building. Some of these novel methods are storing water at temperatures we normally sort of say you shouldn't be storing at. And there isn't at the moment the kind of, we've talked about this, the pluses and minuses of prescriptive guidance, but some of that isn't established yet, other than in broader terms. So it's left to interpretation at this point. And then I'd say we've got some fantastic opportunities at the moment with Internet of Things and remote monitoring within buildings that could do a lot of what we're doing as service providers. But maybe the guidance out there hasn't quite aligned yet. And I know that there's talk within our membership organisations and our societies to establish a form of guidance around these new devices that can be absolutely fantastic as a monitoring of your control schemes. And then I'd say another one for us at the moment is, I'm not sure if it's the same in the US. Well, yes, I am, but the levels are different. But we have almost like trigger levels for Legionella positives over here. They've been established based on very old cultured methods of how you measure the colony forming units per litre. So trigger used to be at 100. It was set at 100 because that used to be almost the lowest level that it could be detected. And we've now got detection much lower than that, even in using cultured methods. And we've got new methods coming in like PCR, qPCR, some of the lateral flow method. But there's a very little guidance around how you use those correctly or what some of those results are meaning to our end users. So they tend to get now used more as trend analysis.
So let's say you took a sample, it came back and it was positive. The first thing you're looking at is colony forming units. Are you also looking at species? And then you've got a document that says if you're within this range with this species, you must do this?
There's no correlation with those at the moment. I'm sure that's coming. As I said, the qPCR tends to be used for trend analysis. We 99% of the time still used the cultured method because it's considered still the gold standard and it's the one that most people understand. But the labs, which are now reporting those colony forming units, are able to do it at even lower levels. So from our point of view as a service provider, we still need to report that to our client. It's a very low level of Legionella, but we would not be comfortable effectively just saying, oh, only when it gets over 100. We believe that we need to effectively say to our client, look, clearly there's Legionella in the system. Let's look at doing something about it. But yeah, that comes with its own complications in that there's, off the back of us being able to get these lower detection rates, we are probably establishing more and more, or having to establish more and more reactive control methods within these buildings as well. But I'm not saying that's right or wrong, but I'm just saying it's there, and it's something that's really just in the last few years in the UK We've seen an uptick, certainly sort of since almost the COVID pandemic as well.
Well, this is why I think it's so important to have people all over the world within the water treatment community talk about what's going on, what they're doing specifically about Legionella. So as, people are trying to write laws or improve laws, we're all getting better. We're all learning from each other. We're not trying to do anything from scratch. We're taking information, making that information not only available, but the reason that we're making decisions. And I don't want to get on a soapbox, but I think so many times people have blinders on to what's going on around them. And there's just so much information out there that we can do better for the entire population and the people like you and me that are involved in running those things.
I've sort of made this point to you as well personally, Trace, is why I'm a big believer in us being much more collaborative as an industry. Less concerned about pointing out what somebody else is doing, but actually establishing what's working for organisations. And that was just so great to see when we came over to the US. That was clearly the culture over in the US water treatment sector. So yeah, that was great.
Now, I've been told the similar organization that you have to the Association of Water Technology is the Water Management Society, which affectionately is abbreviated as WMSOC. Is that a correct statement?
That's correct. So WMSOC is effectively one of our sort of societies, if you like, for our sector. And then we have the Legionella Control Association as well, which is probably the one that most of the water treaters in our sector effectively have to be members of the Legionella Control Association to ensure that they're in a position to attract work, if you like.
Would you say that those two organizations, WMSOC and AWT, are very similar? Or are there vast differences? I'm not very familiar with WMSOC.
So the Water Management Society, I'd say, is much more about the think tank of the industry, if you like. There is a lot of crossover between it. You'll see a lot of the members in the Water Management Society. They won't be individual members of the Legionella Control Association, but often their organisations will be. So there is a bit of a crossover. And you'll find that actually one or other will be on the board of the other organisation. But the Water Management Society, I would say, would be probably more like the AWT in terms of let's see what new guidance we need to sort of be involved in. They're about sort of the education of the industry as well.
You brought up CWT a couple of times, and I want to commend you. CWT is something that I'm trying to promote anybody within our industry to achieve. And you guys are doing the exact same thing over in the UK. Why are you doing that? What's the importance of CWT to you?
So this is, I guess, from SMS environmental sort of point of view. We've been long-standing champions, I think, for standards within our sector and just kind of establishing benchmarks. So as I've mentioned earlier, we've got UCAS accreditation for our risk assessment team. And that's sort of the highest level we can get. We don't have in the UK an equivalent qualification specific to water treatment. And in the absence of that, we've certainly looked at the CWT and gone, this does really what people that have been involved in the industry far longer than me tell me was very much the way the sector was born, in terms of there were only a few organisations in our sector, but everyone within that organisation really understood pure water treatment, understood what those chemicals are doing when they're going into your water system. And so we just wanted as a company to go, we need to get a little bit of that back, just so that there's greater depth of knowledge within our employees, but also to sort of feel what a great value that is. If as an organisation we've got quite a few members now that really understand that sort of pure water treatment and can demonstrate that they understand that. So CWT, yeah, massive champions. You'll be hearing us kind of singing that from the rooftops quite a lot over here.
So we established early in the podcast that SMS Environmental is among the elite in the UK. How did you guys get there? What do you do to stay there?
Well, from my point of view, we've got, I guess, what we consider our sort of three our unique selling points. I've already sort of said we're really proud that we've remained independent. Over in this country, there are a number of organizations of our size that have been bought up and bought up and bought up. And we feel like being independent, it gives us that flexibility to make the decisions we feel are right for our customers. We've always been about transparency of the information we're collecting on behalf of our customers, and have always been able to demonstrate that through some of the systems that we've brought in. And we've always sort of maintained those high standards. And I guess my job, Trace, is to try and effectively broadcast that through some of the presentations that we've done throughout the country, whether that's on the stage with a Water Management Society, a Legionella Control Association, or even establishing our own presentations and at conferences to different organizations or sectors. And then from a kind of customer point of view, it's just maintaining that relationship, maintaining that honesty with the customers. I know I'm very fortunate that I've been involved in the sales side of things for SMS, as I said, for nearly 10 years. I'd class some of our customers as friends now, and some of our biggest customers now were people I knew before SMS Environmental when I'd worked at other organizations, and they've only just become customers. But that is all about just that relationship that you have and maintaining those relationships. And hey, Trace, I'm talking to you. We're all friends. It's lovely to feel like I could go across to the United States, and we've established some really great connections over there as well at the AWT conference, and hope to continue to do so.
Well, I think the internet, podcasts, social media, all that stuff, we're not in separate countries anymore. We're all in, hopefully, the scaling up nation, but we're definitely in the water treater nation. And whenever we can share information with each other, we're going to get better. And what a better community than the industrial water treatment community. So I've really enjoyed getting to know you better and you sharing with me things that are going on in the UK so we can better prepare for them. But I've got some other questions for you. These are the hot seat questions. Are you ready for the lightning round?
Let's go for the lightning round then, Trace. Come on.
Here we go. So with this, I always like to ask people that are in another country than I am, the actors, because we get to learn new actors. But we're getting there. So here's the first question. If you could go back in time and speak to your former self on your very first day as a water treater, what advice would you give yourself?
It might sound a bit cheesy, but it is kind of be curious and maintain an open mind and maintain your high standards. It's pretty simple, but
it's great advice. What are the last few books that you've read?
Well, Trace, I fall into that demographic of male men that don't read very much. So I saw one of the questions that you were going to ask me was, what's the last 3 books you've read? And I was like, Trace, you're lucky if I've read 3 books. I read a lot in my role, but I guess the last 2, I think we've already discussed one. I've read Traction, and this was part of being part of the senior leadership team for SMS Environmental. We're introducing an EOS model. For me, that's almost like a how-to guide for senior leadership teams, and it's been really, really useful and is really changing the culture here at SMS. So that's been great. And I guess the sort of personal one, as I said, I very rarely read, but I've read Nick Offerman. Nick Offerman's Paddle Your Own Canoe, I think it was called, only because I loved his character in Parks and Rec. And it's not going to be a book that will change everyone's life, I'm afraid, Trace. But Nick Offerman has always struck me as somebody that I could just go and have a beer with and get on with. And that came across in the book as well. He also shares some of my passions like woodwork and good values.
Lee, when they make a movie about your life, who do you want playing Lee?
Well, I've already been told by John Sanford, who needs I didn't get a choice in this, Trace. So he said, tell them Ed Helm. Ed Helm. And to be honest, I had no idea. But I do know who Ed Helm is. So I was like, yeah, okay. So Ed Helm, for those that don't know, played Andy, I believe, in The Office and was in the Hangover movies. And I think why John felt like that was a person that could play me in a movie is because he has some of the same facial characteristics of me. We've got this nice long face. And then I think over in the States, you'd call it preppy, but over here, posh. I've got this sort of posh, sort of affable demeanor for people come into contact with me for the first time. But yeah, so I think the characteristics sort of seem to match up with mine. So as I said, I've got no choice on that Trace. So I apologize.
So a bit of useless trivia, and you confirmed this because somebody told this to me. So posh, a term that you use over there quite a bit. I was told that was back to the shipping days when people used to travel on ship liners, and it meant port outbound, starboard homeward.
Yeah, exactly. That is exactly where it's come from. So they were the expensive cabins to have on board a ship. And yeah, we've got a well-established class system over here, Trace, as you might know. I'm always considered posh, but I don't ever see myself as that. But there you go. It's fine.
Very good. Last question. If you could talk to anybody throughout history, who would it be with and why?
Now, I did give this some thought, but genuinely, I don't ever look back on history, Trace, and go, you know what, I'd really like to sort of spend some time with them. I always think we're in a much better position in today's world, effectively. But I did go back to my my sort of study days, and I studied fine art at uni. I'm a bit of an artist, and I thought, wow, if you're going to meet any one of those artists and kind of go, wow, what a life, I'd say Caravaggio. I don't know if you ever come across Caravaggio, Renaissance.
I don't think I have.
Effectively, sort of back end of the Renaissance, real punk rock. If you ever look up his life, you'll see that man, how he ever fitted in any paintings as he went round is beyond me. But yeah, he had quite a colourful life. So I won't go into that too much, but I'll let other people find out more about his life.
Lee, I want to thank you for coming on the Scaling Up H2O podcast. Before I let you go, we already educated the nation about posh. What's another phrase that you can leave us that's popular in the UK?
So a phrase then, Trace, a UK phrase. So let's go with one for saying goodbye and sticking with my posh demeanor. Say cheerio, Trace.
See, Cheerio over here is a breakfast cereal, so we are all learning together.
Hey, don't worry, Trace. We know Cheerios over here as well.
Lee, thanks again for coming on the show.
I appreciate it, Trace. Thank you very much for having me.
Nation, I love that the water treatment community is a community. It doesn't matter where you live. The fact that you practice water treatment, there is a brother and sisterhood around all of us that we just understand what each other is going through. And that allows us to really have a connection with people without having to go through a lot of introduction. Oh, you're a water treater? I get it. So, Nation, I hope you are taking advantage of being a member of the Scaling Up Nation. That's one of the reasons that we do the hang each and every quarter. And I hope you are taking advantage of perhaps an organization that you can go to a conference to, or maybe you can even do some volunteer work for. When you do that, you get to meet so many wonderful people, just like I met Lee. And Lee and I had quite a bit of fun before the podcast and after the podcast. Now, you all just hear the recorded part. Everybody doesn't hear what we do to try to get set up and then making sure we've got everything that we need on the back end of that. But Lee told me that another saying that he wanted the Scaling Up Nation to know was rabbit on. So, and he says that means to run on about something. And that's what I typically do each and every week on this podcast. He said that that was an English expression that he thought everybody should know. And then I told him when I was over there, I had something called Welsh rabbit. And he laughed because, as I found out, there is absolutely no rabbit in Welsh rabbit. I believe it's a cheese dish, so I don't know how that got its name. Speaking of names, in the very beginning, I was talking about the Association of Water Technology's annual conference that's taking place September 10th through 13th in Louisville. Well, there's so many different ways to say that. There's Louisville, there's Louisville, there's Louisville, there's Louisville, and there's probably 5 others. Well, Louisville, I think I've heard as well. So however you say it however. There's probably an official way to say that. I don't know what the official way. Maybe we'll learn that together at the conference. But I hope I see you there. That's a conference I always go to. That's the conference that I met Lee at. That's the conference that I met John at, that we kept on talking about, John Sanford. And I got to hear his great presentation. So all of those conferences and the AWT conference that I just mentioned are going to be on our events page. So go to scalinguph2o.com, navigate over to events, and you can see all of that. And the staff really has done a great job here because it will have information on the conference. You can put things on your calendar simply by clicking that button. And then it will open up another window to go to that conference's page, and it will open up a brand new window so you don't have to keep going back and forth. I think the staff thought of everything here. Now, maybe we missed something, and if we did, let us know about that. But I am so proud of the resources that we have on the Scaling Up H2O podcast website, where you can search every single podcast. We've got all of our transcripts up there. So as you put things in, those are searchable transcripts. As guests send things to us to share with you, we put those in our archives, and those are all searchable. Somebody was telling me they put something in to ask a water treatment question, and the first 4 Google searches that came up were all Scaling Up H2O. I'm so proud of that. And the staff is doing a great job to make sure that it stays that way. So if you haven't logged on our website, scalinguph2o.com, you might want to do that, especially if you got a question about water treatment. Now, if you've got a question about water treatment and you don't think I've covered it, by all means, let me know what that is. And you can go to scalinguph2o.com/show ideas, and you can let me know all about what your question is. If it's a guest, you can let me know that too. Whatever the idea is, I want to know it because I want to make sure we have thousands of shows in the Scaling Up H2O future. Something we do have in the future is a brand new Drop by Drop with James.
Welcome to Drop by Drop with James, the podcast segment where we wonder, explore, think about, imagine, and learn industrial water treatment. You guessed it, drop by drop. Together. In today's segment, I'm thinking about your family and friends. You head off to work to save the world with your industrial water treatment skills each day. Do your family and friends have any idea what you do? Have you ever shown them your test kit? Have you ever tested water in front of them? Have you ever shown them your service reports? Have you ever shared the types of customers you have? Have you ever described the operations and processes you get to see? You may be an industrial water treatment superhero, but you don't have to have a secret identity too. Let the world around you know what you do. I'm James McDonald, and I want to encourage you to be like water by forming bonds with those around you, dissolving new knowledge, and making worthy ripples, drop by drop.
Thanks, James. Nation, like I said, I hope to see you at one of these upcoming conferences. If it's the AWT, you and I can debate how to say Louisville. Maybe there's somebody that's actually from Louisville, and we can figure out what the correct pronunciation is. Until then, we're just going to have to wait. Nation, enjoy your 4th of July. Enjoy your week, and we'll have a brand new episode for you next week of Scaling Up H2O. Scaling Up Nation, it is time for you to prove to the industry, your boss, your peers, and most importantly, yourself, that you are among the best in the industry. And the best way that I can think of to do that is to get your Certified Water Technologist designation. To help prepare you to sign up for that CWT examination, we prepared an entire course designed to build your confidence so you can sit for the CWT examination. Go to scalinguph2o.com/CWT prep. Once again, that's scalinguph2o.com/CWT prep today.